Today we're taking a look at the Kuzar series of lifts. We've been using exclusively Genies and Sumners for many years, and then we started incorporating these probably about 3 to 4 years ago, maybe more than that. We're just going to have a brief overview of all the different models that they have, which is quite a few, and show you some advantages and disadvantages of each model, and then kind of talk to you about a comparison of why we like these more than Sumners and sometimes less than Sumners, but definitely more than Genies. So on our Kuzar K-31s here, they are the smallest by far footprint. They actually have a very small mast as far as the width of it, but they're still able to do 551 pounds. And we're gonna have to show you in a minute, that's actually based on where the weight is on the fork. So the unit itself weighs 242 pounds and the work surface is 5.9 by 5.6 feet. So these folded up, the only disadvantage to them, they're pretty tall. So Tanner's gonna measure here and show you the height. So this would be the tallest. And what do we have here? So we've got right at about 74 inches tall. And as you can see, these other ones are much smaller. So getting through a door, this is probably gonna be close to the max of what you can do without having to lean it over. But Josh is gonna show us how to set up the forks on these. And this is similar for all the models. You just pull off, if you have an array bar, you pull that off. And then he can tell you what he's doing here.
I'm gonna pull this pin, this cotter pin, pull this other pin out, and you'll notice that one side is slanted, or it is slanted one way. You want it to be pointing up when you put it on the bar, on the arm.
And we like this because with it being slanted up, once you put the weight on it and it deflects down, it looks like it's not going to fall off. So on our Sumners, it does have a slight deflection down, and it never had a problem with it. It just doesn't look safe. So once you've got that on there.
And once you've got both of those arms on there, you'll find that these little line array bars that they sell actually slide on there very easily. Twist these little hand bolts, and we've put a shackle on them to where we can just shackle our line array to them very quickly.
And we got these, we were pretty early on in adoption to Kuzar, so these were some of the first Kuzars that we got. And it doesn't really tell you on here, but our 551 pounds, I believe it's 24 inches out on the mast. So if Tanner's got his measuring tape, we can just kind of show you that that's going to be, if your line array is somewhere, and it might not be 24, it might be 20. I just remember it's somewhere pretty far in. These don't have stickers on them. I'm pretty sure all the other ones have stickers that show your weight rating and where it can be. So that was kind of misleading. Hopefully we can end up getting some from Mountain Shop is where we got these. So the other thing that's on the K-31 is the legs. So what do you have to say about the legs on these?
So the legs on these and one other model are not super long. I think they're somewhere in 9-inch range. Is that right, Tanner? Somewhere around 9 inches, which on these makes it fairly easy because you've got the smaller tubing on the bottom that keeps it lower to the ground, so it's easy to level out. So there's a level on the back that we can show you later, but it makes it easier to level out and get this nice and sturdy with that smaller tubing. But
so on the K-31s and also with our K-40s over here, it's almost as if they were meant to be on ground that's level or inside. We can use these for other things, but basically we have to put wood underneath to make it be more level. And on the other ones, there's a lot more, I mean, a whole lot more leg.
There's a whole lot more,
yeah,
whatever that would be, room for error, margin for error, adjustment.
Especially on the big boys.
Especially on the K57s.
You have a whole lot more. So
I think these are somewhere in the 18-inch range once you get that foot down.
And weight rating is not a huge difference. But as far as the K-31, once you get these way up in the air, since it is such a small profile mast that's going up, there is a little bit of play and deflection, but that also helps out with the weight. And it keeps you from going up with as many tiers of it because of its already stored height being so high. So K-31 for indoor, pretty good. For video wall stuff, things that are not going to be making it tilt back and forth much at all. So there's the K-31s, and we will jump to the next one. So onto our K-40s. So these are very similar to the K-31s. They don't have as much adjustability down on the legs like we were showing. Weight-wise, they can do 593 pounds, which is very similar to the other ones. The stored height is a little bit shorter on these, which makes them easier to get in and out of some doors. The biggest advantage we've seen is we have a wider mast here. So Tanner can measure the mast on this and the other ones. And just to let you know, we're looking at 6 inches on this one, close to 6. And then on our K-31s, probably somewhere in the 5.
Yeah, right at 5 inches.
Yeah, 5 inches on that. So a little bit more sturdy on this, a little bit wider footprint. I think we found out that from front to back, this was much wider. There wasn't much of a difference as far as from here to here. It was just really from the front to the back. So when you're going out on these guys, you're able to get a little bit more weight on them before there's ever a problem. There is a sticker system on these, which is nice, that actually lets you know how much you can put depending on how far out you are on them. So 320 pounds if you're all the way out on the end of the forks, and then 530 is going to be if you're out 50 centimeters, which of course we do imperial here. And then 590 pounds, 95, which is what is rated for if you were this far inside at 30 centimeters. So pretty interesting. Exact same thing for our pins. These are kind of angled up. That way when you do have the weight on it and it deflects, it will go down just like all the other ones, the K-31s. But when they're folded up, we'll get Josh to kind of stand near it. These are just a lot shorter. So about the same height as Josh.
Right around 6 feet, maybe right under. Yeah. Got 5'11" here.
Yeah, which very easy to get through doors, very easy to get through doors to the box truck for you to move to. The other thing that we'll kind of show you on this is going to be our handle situation. So the handles on these are a little bit bigger and longer than the handles are on our K-31. So Tanner's getting us exactly a foot.
They were 8 inches on the K-31. I guess it ends up being a foot on the other one.
So 4 inches difference, which doesn't seem like much, but it's a huge difference whenever you're having to go up and down with these. So another thing which Josh can show us how we end up having to do these, on our K-31 we can show you our pin system. So there's a lift and a lock, so you'd want to go to where there's no weight on it, and then we can move our lift one here. And if you put it in lift, it will hit a knob every time it goes up. You'll hear a click. And we'll keep going up and we'll get some action on this. You can see it move. And that's it popping into the next available hole. So the next time we get to one, we will stop at it. And then you can turn and rotate that. And then you'll let weight off by going down just a little bit, and that puts the weight on the pin instead of being on this cable, which is just a better structural thing for the lift. They never recommend for you to raise this up without having some type of weight. So Tanner, while we go down, will be holding on to that. So to go down, you go ahead and pull off, and then we will go down. And they go down pretty smooth as long as you do what you're supposed to. The only downfall to any type of lift like this is, first off, not having it greased properly. But second off, if people don't understand the pin configuration, you do end up having to put this in a location to where it can actually lift or lower. And then you have to lock it, go to the next one, and know which order. So if you were to start with this one mast would be lifting all the other masts in the wrong order. So just doing a little bit of schooling for whoever buys these is a big deal. But it's the same thing on the pin system for all these, the 40, the 31, the 57, and whatever this guy is over here, 50, I believe.
The K50.
So there's the main difference between the 40 and the 31 is basically just a little bit of weight. The mast is a little bit bigger. You still have the feet that don't have nearly as much of adjustability, and that's really about it, a little bit bigger of a winch system. So the next one we're looking at here is going to be our K50. So the K50 does sport a little bit more weight. We can do 661 pounds, trying to get the camera to focus here. And then its stored height is so short. It's 5 feet, basically 5.15. It does weigh a little bit more, so this will end up being 375 pounds. And it does take up a little bit more of a footprint for the feet, but I mean, it's just so small. So we'll go ahead and refocus, get Josh to stand near this guy.
Somewhere in the range of 5 feet or so.
We're just super excited because there's a lot of small trailers that we will rent these type of things to people that they just will not fit through a trailer. So we'll be looking at that portion. For its focus is always so great. So right in about 64 and a half. So pretty cool to be as small as it is and be able to hold up as much weight as it can. So it's kind of similar to Genie's. If you don't go up to the max height, it is supposedly rated for more weight. They're not going to tell you that or show you that for liability reasons. But it also has on the forks the different weight rating depending on where you're at. So we've got 660, 589, 463, 364, and there's one that's probably underneath where we have the fly bar too. Definitely recommend getting their fly bar. It's just much safer. I've seen people, and we've done it in the past with our Sumners because they're more rated for it, just putting a span set over these. The problem is then you have pressure pulling in on these forks. This keeps the pressure literally just pulling down, and there's no force pulling in to try to crush where these weld joints are. So much better to use their fly bars. So these, what are the big differences you guys see?
The biggest I've seen for sure is the height when it's folded up. But the mass does seem pretty. It's an inch bigger than the K40s.
Okay.
So should be a little bit more sturdy there. Obviously the feet, we've talked about a little bit.
Yeah.
These are definitely going to be a lot more helpful to be in situations where it's not as level and have that adjustability that you need. Because right now we're on a pretty level surface, and I'm only about halfway with each leg, whereas like the K40s, I'm almost maxed out. I am maxed out on one of them, and it's still a pretty level surface. So that's a big advantage there, I should say. The extra weight.
These do have a little bit more weight just because of the beefiness of the mast and how tall they can go to, which, what is this one, 19 feet? I can't remember. Yeah, 19 feet, 5 inches. So not going to be nearly as much height as some of the other ones, but that also allows you to get more weight. And like this will go to 20 feet, 2 inches on the K-31. Do we need that? It's not really that much of a difference as far as height, but big difference in weight. And then just being that short is such a big deal. Being able to go through so many doors and so many obstacles that we have. This would be a little bit easier to get up on a stage if we had to as well, to try to help install some things. They all seem to have this kind of like neoprene wheel until you get up to the K57, and they actually have the typical wheels that we see from like Coulson casters. These also, none of these have a structural mode, so none of them have to have the outriggers like the K57 that we're about to get to as well. But also having that pretty significant bend up, that way it deflects down to make everything look like it should. So really clean, and as Tanner did point out, you can move the mast and you can move this to get it even lower. But you do have your different positions on these. You can take these out and let them be on the bottom to where they'll catch truss, or you can have them up at the top to get that extra bit of height if you do need it.
I think one other thing we're noticing on these that is kind of good is these actually have the bigger feet as opposed to the K40s and K31s that have the smaller ones. So where they actually grab more surface and have a little bit wider stance.
And we definitely recommend as much weight as you'll be putting on these, and the majority of your weight is going to be on the front feet, putting some type of wood on the ground, especially if it's going to be on a stage that is just plywood, because then it will distribute that weight out more evenly instead of just making a massive hole and having the risk of what you have flown in there falling. So I think that's about it on the K50, and we're about to go over and look at the K57. So the last one we'll look at, the K57, which is kind of a beast of a lift. It's pretty tall. I'm going to say it's probably taller than our K31s over there, but it's capable of going up and holding a lot of weight. So we've got roughly 75 inches there, and then if we had the feet still on it, we're looking at, we'll just call it 78 for safety, but really because this kind of sticks up a little bit. So pretty tall. But you can use these same way if you need to have it to where the majority of the outrigger is at the top or the bottom. You can change that around. It is kind of hard. I know Tanner's had to change those out a few times. When you take that out, sometimes you end up having to beat it out and beat it back in. And it's good to have a very big metric set to get out this gigantic metric bolt. So not something that we typically carry. So you notice the big difference on this is we do have these things going out to the outriggers that put it more of a structural device. The handle's not much bigger, but the gearing ratio is way different. So this particular gear, it takes a lot of cranks to move it, which you should be thankful for, because when you start putting the amount of weight this can actually hold, it's very useful. These little guys can be repinned however you want to, and we can let Josh show you on that.
They have three different positions, but essentially it's just for when it's folded up, like our one is there. It's a handle to grab and pull and push as need be. We like to pull them just for safety so that we can catch them if they did try to fall over. But
and it is our only set that actually has casters that are on the back in case you do lay this down. We don't recommend ever putting any lift down on the ground. If you do, these are better off for doing it because you can lock them using the pins that are on the side. And once you've locked them using the pins and you crank and put pressure on the pulley, then they are much more likely to not slip off the tracks. Because inside each one of these, there's tracks the cables ran through, and if that ever comes loose, it gets terrible. This is also the first lift, if I'm not mistaken, unless there's some on the other ones, that have all of these that allow you to do multiple tie-down points if you were to need to. So this lift gives you a lot more options on things for securing and running guy wires, and just a lot more beefy, especially whenever you put the outrigger. So looking at what it can actually do, it's a ton. So this can go up to 23 feet in the air. If we are in dynamic mode, which means lifting, we can lift 1,102 pounds, which is pretty significant. Or if we've already lifted it up and put it in structural mode and put motors on these, 2,646 pounds per lift, which is incredible. So unit height, 6.23 feet. This does weigh a lot. It's 492 pounds, but it does weigh less than our Sumners over here, which is great. So sorry for the camera focusing being so great. So these do take up a pretty big footprint, 7.7 by 7.4 feet once the legs are out. So quite a bit of space for this to actually take up. But the amount of weight that can be lifted from this is pretty significant. So the other thing Josh can show you is the feet on this are completely different than any of the other ones.
These legs, I think, feet are somewhere in the range of 18 inches, I think is what we figured out one day. You can see they're up to my knee. So you've got a lot of adjustment for if it's unlevel. It's got the big feet like we were talking about on the K50 for the extra grabbing of the surface, and just wider stance. It's got a lot of other cool features like we talked about the handle a second ago for pulling. This handle actually removes and is very different than the rest of them. So it's another option for if that's useful for you. Again, the tie down points, the outriggers, the extra casters. It's a very souped out lift, for lack of a better term. It's got a lot of options available to let you do kind of whatever you can figure out to do with it. One thing we didn't go over a second ago is the actual center leg that's on the back here that actually gives you a good center point of support as well, kind of in between all the casters, as well as our level on the back. All of these have this level, but this is the only one with this nice little center jack.
And the center jack also helps a lot whenever we're loading these on trucks. We can put down that center jack and it just kind of keeps it from moving around. We still strap these, and we try to strap them not going around any type of supports like this, but actually trying to get to the mast where it's a flat point. Really smooth lifts if you know how to operate them. The K57s as well utilize the pin. For you to be in structural mode, you have to use these pins correctly. We added these little things. It's not something you have to do, but it helps us to know when we're about at the max point. But if you use the pin system, it's so easy for these to move. If there's no weight or pressure, they just come out so easily. But if you end up putting pressure on it, then try to move them, they're not. Then you have to guess whether you should go up or down, and it can kind of get a little tiresome. So setting these up, we definitely recommend that you set them up and get these outriggers on before you put any type of weight. If not, those get to be a little bit tough. If you realize that you need to have a little more going this way, you can reach up at the top and grab and pull back, and it makes it a little bit easier to get that pin in. So just think about it for a little while whenever you're setting things up, what you think would actually make sense. You also have adjustment with that leg that can move this leg up and down to make it easier for you to put the pin in. So before you let your crew just grab a hammer and start beating on things to get stuff to go in, just think through the physics of it. And it makes it a lot easier for you to be able to keep your lifts maintained and proper the way they are. As you can see, we've got a ton of Kuzars. We've got more in the other room. We've got some rented out. Some of our 31s are out, so the reason we only got one in here. These are new to us, the 50s. We're kind of excited to see how well they do. But anything else you can think of to add on these?
Off the top of my head right now, Tanner is showing our size you need to change out the actual mast portion.
12 millimeter.
And this is showing 21.
And 21 on the other side. Focus is so good on this iPhone. So anything you think you'd want to add at all, Tanner? All right, man of little words today. But that's just kind of a little brief video to show you guys the difference between all the different models that they do make. And there might be another model that we don't have that's in this kind of, I don't know really what you would call it, ecosystem of their Kuzar lifts. I know they do have some other smaller Kuzar lifts that are not fork-driven lifts. They're actually just for vertical. But we've been really happy with them. It's just something not as rental friendly as a Sumner. A Sumner, you literally set it up and then you lift it and tear it down. These, you have to actually know what you're doing. So we've made some videos and we sent it to people on how to do this system. They still have trouble with it, which is kind of amazing. But just do everything you can to maintain these, and they should last you a long, long, long time. And make sure to use everything that's actually rated for what you're doing. So we make sure that we use their fly bars, we use shackles that are truly rated for what they're supposed to do. This is not something that we've been shown to do, but it seems to work. We end up putting that fly bar there to where we don't lose it and not have it. And we put the extra pins in locations to kind of keep them together to where we don't lose those as well. So please hit like and subscribe. If you end up purchasing these from Kuzar, give a shout out that you saw the video from Sweet Tree. We work with Mountain Shop a lot, so hopefully that relationship will continue going strong. But please hit like and subscribe and let us know whatever you want to see. Have a great day.